Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered again on this Sabbath, which happens to be the 14th of the 9th month on our Creator's calendar, which lines up with November 25th, 2023 on the Gregorian calendar. And we're continuing with our reading of the Bereshith or Genesis, but I wanted to show you something real quick in what's called the Temple Scroll. And this particular version is from the study edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's available on PDF. It's also a 2-volume book set for a few $100s if you want to buy it. It is not the most expansive edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls you can get. That, I believe that would be the DJD, they call it, the Discoveries of the Judean Desert, which is multiple books with the scrolls and the commentaries from the scholars and all the publishings, but that's very expensive. So if you want to be able to study generally the Hebrew and Aramaic of the scrolls that were available, you can get the study edition to look at it. If you really want to get in depth, you can spend a lot of money and get the larger resources there. But anyways, this is from what's called the Temple Scroll. I won't get into the details beyond what it's titled. You can look into that more later, or I'm sure we'll cover it eventually. But right here, this is from column 29, okay? And I want to direct you to what is being spoken of here, because it's going to be covering what we're talking about. So he's making rules for their offerings, and he was giving directions on the Hikkel and what it should be like, okay? And he says, he will accept all that they offer, and they shall be for me a people, and I will be for them forever, or for ages. And I shall dwell with them forever and always, or for ages and witnessed. I shall set apart my temple with my esteem, for I shall make my esteem reside over it until the day of creation. He talks about that in Yobelim and in a few other places when he creates the new Shamayim and the new earth in which righteousness dwells, and there's no more tears or sadness or sorrow or sin ever again. When I shall create my temple, establishing it for myself for all days, according to the covenant which I made with Jacob at Bethel. And that's what we are going to be looking at. It's the Hikkel that he's making without hands that is Mashiach in you, the expectation of esteem, right? We are the living stones that are being built, if you will, which was the whole point of the parables and the shepherd of Hermas of the building of the tower, right? But I wanted you to see this, that he is doing all these things according to the covenant that he made with Jacob at Bethel. Now, there's a book that I recently came across called Our Descent from Israel, Proved by Cumulative Evidence by Hugh P. Colquhoun. And it's an older book. It was written in the 1930s, but it really takes, and while that seems old to us, as it comes to what they call British Israelism, or the idea of the Anglo-Saxons and the Celtic peoples and the Germanic peoples being of the seed of Jacob and the seed of Abraham, literally the sons of Isaac or Yitzhak as the Saxons. It started becoming prominent when the fullness of the nations was coming in, just like it was foretold to Ephraim. And that was when the British Empire was coming to its fullness. Then they started realizing the promises in the covenant, the birthright promises given to Yahusuf's children, were being fulfilled in Britain, the nation and company of nations, and America, that great nation. So either way, in that book, he mentions specifically, or it goes into great detail, quoting a whole bunch of different sources that they'd had for over 100 years at his time, proving with evidence from language, from ethnology, archaeology, history, science, pretty much every venue that they had available that we are the literal descendants of Abraham. And part of that is going through what scripture says and defines as his people. When it mentions Yaakov, it is always and not is without exclusion talking about his people in a state of not being right. Okay. When he had labored, when he had wrestled with Elohim and overcame, he was called Yisrael, right, the Prince of El. But before then, and even after he was named that, there was times where he was called Yaakov during his trials. And if you remember, Yaakov is he will get what's coming at the heel of what he's doing, immediate reciprocity for his actions. So there's a play on words there, but in that book, it specifically shows the scriptural intent and definitions of these words and how they're used throughout scripture. So you keep that in mind, and foretellings that are like parables become a lot more easy to comprehend. All right, moving on. All right, we're currently on Bereshit, and we are reading through chapter 26 last week, right? And or not last week, but the week before last, I believe, and we did something else last week. So either way, we're back on track here with chapter 27, in which we will see it's the life of Yaakov in his sojourning, his leaving his father and mother, being taken in by Yahuwah himself, and then the issues that he's having with his brother here. If you keep in mind, all of these are parables, and while it was literally true, it literally was walked out with our ancestors. They were foretelling future events in their children as well. And this relates to the renewed covenant times, where he goes outside of the land to labor for the things that are for his own, right? Excuse me. So chapter 27. And it came to be when Yitzhak was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called Esau, his elder son, and said to him, My son. And he said, Here I am. And he said, See now, I am old. I do not know the day of my death, and therefore take now your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt wild game for me, and make me a tasty dish such as I love, and bring it to me to eat, in order that my inner being does barak you before I die. And Ribkah or Rebekah heard when Yitzhak spoke to Esau, his son. And Esau or Ishu went to the field to hunt wild game and to bring it. Now, one thing you'll notice, this says Ribkah. A lot of the words in Hebrew, if we were to just learn the phonetics of it, and really if we were to replace the vowel points with the original vowel system, what they call mater lectonus, where they had certain consonants that were used as vowels in certain circumstances. If you just had the spelling that way and you were a little fluid with the pronunciation of the vowels, you would find a plethora, a multitude of English words right there in the Hebrew, because it's literally where most of our vocabulary comes from as the original language that English was. But again, Ribka is resh bait kof hey, right? Rivka, right? They say in the modern Hebrew, but Rebecca is just as easily done with different vowels. So moving on. It says, and Rebecca or Ribka spoke to Yaakov, her son, saying, See, I heard Eth your father speak to Ishu your brother, saying, Bring me wild game and make me a tasty dish to eat, and barak you in the presence of Yahuwah before my death. And now, my son, listen to my voice according to what I commandeth you. Go now to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats. So 2 choice kids, and I make a tasty dish from them for your father, such as he loves. And you shall take it to your father, and he shall eat it, so that he might barak you before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, see, Ishu, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am smooth-skinned. What if my father touches me? Then I shall be like a deceiver in his eyes, and shall bring a curse on myself and not a barakah. If you remember what I'd mentioned, that there's some things in scripture that are inversed or kind of flipped around from their original. The best example I have is like the Maccabees. Originally, the Maccabees, you can call them king priests that were beneficial for the people, that, right? And later on, it turned into an apostasy thing that was more in error. But you have the flip side on the other. After he came, you have the same thing, but it's inverse. You have priest kings that came about that was a nefarious thing and covert from the beginning. All right. In the same way with Esau or Eshu, his name, right? When they say he was hairy, that's Sheen, Ayin, Resh. And then his name was Esau, it would be Ayin, Sheen, and then Wa. So that their letters are kind of inverse there. And in the same way, this whole thing is an inverse of a parable of what happened. For a while, it's Yaakov being deceptive, right? To get the Baraka here. At the reverse of this, you have Edom, the ones that were the cause of what became Nicolaitan Christianity, using the covert or occultish means, right? Being deceptive, if you will. But back on track. It says, but his mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice and go, get them for me. And he went and fetched them and brought them to his mother. And his mother made a tasty dish, such as his father loved. And Ribkah took the best garments of her elder son Ishu, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the tasty dish and the bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Jacob. And he went to his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am. Who are you, or who are you, my son? And remember, every time I say that's literally the aleph tau as part of the word or in a place in front of it. Okay. And Jacob said to his father, I am Ishu, or Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you said to me. Rise now, sit, and eat of my wild game, so that your inner being might barak me. Yet Yitzhak said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because Yahuwah your Elohim brought it to me. Then Yitzhak said to Jacob, come near now, so that I feel you, my son, if you this my son, Esau, or not. So that's the question, to see, right, if you are my son or not. And Yaakov went near. It looks funny, but I translated it as the actual accurate way that the Hebrew is written. That's why it looks that way. And Yaakov went near to Yitzhak his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esau or Ishu. And he did not recognize him. for his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, and he baruch him. And he said, Eth you this my son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, bring it near to me, and let me eat of my son's wild game, so that my inner being might baruch you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Yitzhak said to him, come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments, and baruch him, and said, see, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which Yahuwah has baruch, and give you the Elohim of the dew of the Shamayim, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be mighty unto your brothers, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those cursing you, and baruch be those that baruch you. And it came to be, as soon as Yitzhak had finished baruch eth Yaakov, and Yaakov had hardly left the presence of Yitzhak his father, that Esau saw, or his brother, came in from his hunting. And he too had made a tasty dish, and brought it to his father, and said to his father, let my father rise and eat of his son's wild game, so that your inner being might baruch me. And his father Yitzhak said to him, who art you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau, or Esau. Then Yitzhak trembled exceedingly and said, who was it then who hunted wild game and brought it to me? And I ate all of it before you came, and I have baruch him. Yes, he is baruch. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, baruch me too, my father. And he said, your brother came with deceit and took your baruch, or your blessing. And Esau said, is this why his name then is called Jacob? For he has caught me by the heel these 2 times. He took my birthright, and see, now he has taken my baruch. And this is the way it's spelled in the Hebrew. Okay. And he said, have you not reserved a barakah for me? Then Yitzhak answered and said to Esau, or Esau, see, mighty I have made you unto him. Or sorry, mighty I have made him unto you. That word is gibor, the word that we'd use for like gibborim. Today in modern Hebrew, it's used for gentlemen, but it literally means mighty men, or the mighty men of valor. Right? It says, see, mighty gibor I have made him unto you, and all his brothers I have given to him as servants, and I have sustained him with grain and wine. And what then shall I do for you, my son? Now, you might wonder, what brothers does he have when there's only one? Why is it plural? But there's no distinction here. Just like father and fathers, it doesn't matter if it's your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. It's ab or abot, or it doesn't make a distinction. This is your relations, your brothers of Shem. It says, if you haven't figured it out, Abraham was of the leading family of the first house of Shem. Just like the elders of all the houses have prominent roles. And that was true even through to this. And it was bestowed on Jacob and to his children. They were to be appointed strong over all the sons of Seth, or of Shem, right? And they, his brothers, specifically Abraham's children, were to be his servants, right? What you call cousins. So Yishmael would be included, the sons of Keturah, who were all part of the Goyim, or the nations that would be the great nations that would come from Abraham, if you recall. But moving on, or not great nations, but the nations that would come from him. It says, see, mighty I have made him unto you, and all his brothers I have given to him as servants, and I have sustained him with grain and wine. And what then shall I do for you, my son? And Eshu, or Esau, said to his father, have you only one Baraka, my father? Barak me, me too, my father. And Eshu lifted up his voice and wept. And Yitzhak his father answered and said to him, see, your dwelling is of the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of the Shamayim from above. And by your sword you are to live, and serve your brother. And it shall be when you grow restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. And Esau hated Yaakov because of the Baraka with which his father Barak, or Baruch him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father draw near. Then I am going to kill my brother Yaakov. And the words of Esau, her older son, were reported to Rebekah, or Rivkah. And she sent and called Yaakov, her younger son, and said to him, see, your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you to kill you. And now, my son, listen to my voice and rise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days until your brother's wrath turns away, until your brother's displeasure turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. And I shall send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Yitzhak, now, you don't get the interlog, or the discourse between them. I was going to say interlog, I meant intercourse, but the discourse between them in the book of Yobelim, there's a little more detail where Yaakov will explain that he's not going to do anything that will offend his father without being sent by him himself. So that then his mother went to Yitzhak and got him to send Yaakov, right? So there's a little context there. It says, and Rebekah said to Yitzhak, I am disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Cheth. If Yaakov takes a wife from the daughters of Cheth, like these two, or like these who are the daughters of the land, what is my life to me? And again, context, you'll see in the book of Yobelim that she was told by Abraham to watch over Yaakov, and he was enjoined by Abraham and her not to take any one of the seed of Canaan, because they were cursed for taking land not allotted to them. And every one of their seed was going to be uprooted and destroyed for what they did. So that was passed on, and some of the children didn't listen. Shimon married a Canaanite, Yehuda married a Canaanite, and then Shimon later repented. You can see the effects of these things through history, but all of this again is parables and things that are foretelling the future, as well as literal events that are the cause of the effects that would happen later. Okay. Chapter 28, and this is the meat and potatoes of what we wanted to get into today. It says, and Yitzhak called Yaakov and Baruch him, and commanded him, and said to him, do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, which is very much like Bethel, the house of El, but you have him in the middle, right? And this is a man. But the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife for yourself from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And El Shaddai Barak eth you, and make you fruitful and increase you, and you shall become an assembly of peoples. The Kahal ha Amim, right? There's some interesting things about the peoples. I've mentioned it before. We're called the people of Elohim, right? When they went out of the land, there was a group of them that became known as the Goyel, or the uh the Gauls, right? The Goths. And both of those are literally the people of El, if you will. And then you have the Germani, right? While the Germani was the Roman name for the genuine Scythians, they called themselves the Deutsch, and the Deutsch are the of the people. Deutschland is of the people's land. The laity, another branch that was romanticized, means of the people. And just like those that came to America, we the people who made a covenant with Elohim. So that's a title that we've carried on throughout history. And there's actually a few places in Yirmiyahu and elsewhere where it talks about where he will make a covenant for the people to be a light to the nations. And they're going to be the ones that were used, which is part of this covenant to Yaakov and why I'm mentioning it. But that covenant to the people is Brith An, Brith Ain, right? You remove the Brith Am, you drop the H and you soften that M to an end, and that's Britain. That was a foretelling of Britain in a few places, which were the fruitful covenant people who were literally fulfilling the promises of the Abrahamic covenant that was given to Yaakov that we're about to read here. So all of that ties together, and there's a lot more like that where you can see in the original languages of the writings that were inspired and given to us that there's plays on words for things later on. Apollyon is one. In Revelation, the rivers that were spewed out of the mouth, right? Or the rivers was the Potomac, the Potomac, which is very similar to Potomac, which was the place of refuge that the woman was going to. There's tons of stuff like that throughout his words. So I highly encourage you to look into it more. But that's just one of them right here. Back on track, it says, and El Shaddai Barak eth you, and make you fruitful and increase you, and you shall become an assembly of peoples, and give you the eth birkat blessing of Abraham. And that was an Aleph Tau before that, right? Just like the land and those that are his. It's the baraka that is his that he will accomplish, okay? To you and your eth, or your seed eth with you, so that you inherit eth the land of your sojournings, which Elohim gave to Abraham. So Yitzhak sent eth Yaakov away, and he went to Padan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Ribkah, the mother of Yaakov and Ishu. And Esau saw that Yitzhak had Baruch eth Yaakov, and sent eth him away to Padan Aram to take himself a wife from there. And that as he eth Baruch him, he gave him a command saying, do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And that Yaakov had obeyed his father and his mother, and had gone to Padan Aram. And if you recall the chapter previous to the one we read first here, he got married to two women that were both Canaanite women when he was 40. Yaakov is leaving to go get his wife when he's 60. So they've been married for 20 years. All right. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Yitzhak, And Esau went to Ishmael and took Machlath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, the head of the Nebatine tribes that were predominant in Arabia for a very long time. But the sister of Nebaioth to be his wife, besides the wives he had. And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a place and stopped over for the night, for the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed and saw a ladder set up on the earth, and its top reached to the Shamayim, and saw messengers of Elohim going up and coming down on it. And see, Yahuwah stood above it and said, I am Yahuwah, Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzhak. So the Yahuwah is being visible to him and standing as a man, meaning this is our Mashiach that is speaking, because the Father is not. Okay. Although there is times where there are visions that men have perceived the Father in a vision or a dream as distinct from the son of Adam or our Mashiach, who is also dealing with him, but that's for a different time. So he says, the land on which you are lying, I give it. And that word has the aleph tau because I in Hebrew can be aleph as a prefix before word. And then it has the past tense forgive, tena, or tenea, right here. So tena is I will, or I give it to your seed, or to you and your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall break forth to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be Baruch in you and in your seed. And see, I am with you and shall guard you wherever you go. And I shall bring you back to this land, for I am not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Or literally, Asher had deberit lek, right? So that which, or Asher, that straight line of the words or matters or things which I spoke to you. And that is the important thing right here. This is the covenant that he's giving. One of those inversions that I would like to point out is he mentions that they will break forth, right? That word is peretz. And then in the sons of Yahuda, you have zera, which is to scatter, to sow forth as seed, and then peret. But while Zerah's hand came out first, Peretz broke forth and came out first, to which the kingly line went to him and later to Dawid. But Zerah was the one that was scattered or sown amongst the nations, which we will get to in the course of time there. This is an inverse foretelling of that, saying it's going to break forth and spread the children out. And that would be possibly alluding to the times where after the tribe or the kingdom of Yahuda was being taken out and destroyed, Yirmiyahu was also commissioned to plant, and he took the seed of Dawid and brought it over to the seed of Zerah in Ireland, and they got married and founded the kingdom of Ulster at that time. So, and then they overturned until the seed of Dawid was sitting over the children of Israel in Britain, and that's when these promises were starting to be fully fulfilled, and they broke forth in different directions from there, colonizing. So just for context, you can keep these things in mind about how that was playing out. And Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, truly, you can, right? That word can in English, like yes, you can, it means yes in Hebrew. But truly, Yahuwah is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of the Shamayim. And Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone. Now, the birthright, this covenant, and the stone all play a part coming on. And while this isn't seen as very significant in what we call the common scriptures, it has a very prominent place with the birthright people, as we will see. It says, and he took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a standing column, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, or the house of El. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously. And Jacob made a vow, saying, seeing Elohim is with me, and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat, and a garment to put on. When I have returned to my father's house in Shalom, and Yahuwah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. That has implication throughout history as well. And again, keeping in mind the stone, I don't want to give too many things away. And if you've followed along, then you might be familiar with it. But this is literally the history of our people, what's happened to us, and the foundations of what comes after. So it's very important to keep in mind. The book that I mentioned before, I cannot recommend enough. There's hundreds of books. I don't want to get too inaccurate with my statements here, but there's literally hundreds and hundreds of resources that you can find online that show original books and other things that show the history of our people, and that we're the literal house of Israel, if you will, the descendants of Abraham. We're not the only ones. Ephraim and Manasseh is Great Britain, or the Commonwealth of Britain is the fullness of the nations, right? Would be Ephraim in a spiritual capacity. Not everyone is literally of the tribe of Ephraim. There's all 12 tribes represented there and in America. But for foretelling purposes, Ephraim is Britain, Manasseh is America. And just so you know, something to think about, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Manasseh and Ephraim are code names for the Pharisees and Sadducees. All right. And with that, I will say I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, or the rest of Shabbat, the rest of the week ahead. Shavua Tov and Shabbat Shalom. And we will talk to you next time.